Service teardown. HP 14DQ0000 laptop PC. How to replace the base enclosure. Note, the top rubber foot is higher than the bottom one. You need to remember this for their replacement. Removal. Remove the two rubber feet from the base enclosure. Remove the two 4mm P0 Phillips head screws that secure the base enclosure to the top cover. Remove the six 6mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the base enclosure to the top cover. Carefully separate the edges of the base enclosure from the top cover. Remove the base enclosure. Replacement. Place the base enclosure into position over the top cover. Press down firmly along the edges to reattach the base enclosure to the top cover. Replace the six 6mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the base enclosure to the top cover. Replace the two 4mm P0 Phillips head screws that secure the base enclosure to the top cover. Place the two rubber feet into position on the base enclosure. How to replace the battery. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure. Warning: to avoid personal injury and damage to the product, use extreme care not to puncture, twist, or crack the battery. An internal puncture or rupture to the battery has the potential to cause a short, which may result in a thermal event. Removal. Remove the four 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the battery to the top cover. Lift the battery up and disconnect it from the connector. Lift the battery off of the alignment pins. Remove the battery. Replacement. Place the battery onto its alignment pins on the top cover. Push down to connect the battery to the connector. Replace the four 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the battery to the top cover. How to replace the memory module. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and battery. Removal. Push both arms on the memory module outward simultaneously to release the memory module to the spring tension position. Grasp the memory module by the edges and pull gently to remove it. Replacement. Align the notch in the memory module with the key in the memory module slot. At a 30-degree angle, insert the memory module into its slot on the system board. Press down on the memory module until the arms snap into place and lock. How to replace the wireless LAN module. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and battery. Removal. Carefully disconnect the wireless LAN antenna cable from the wireless LAN module by grasping the connectors with a small pair of needle nose pliers or tweezers. Caution: use care when disconnecting the wireless antenna cable from the wireless LAN module. A damaged cable or connector can degrade notebook performance. Remove the screw that secures the wireless LAN module to the system board and allow it to release to the spring tension position. Grasp the wireless LAN module by the edges and pull gently to remove it. Replacement. Align the notch in the wireless LAN module with the key in the wireless LAN module slot on the system board. At an angle, gently insert the wireless LAN module into its slot on the system board. press the wireless LAN module down and replace the screw that secures the wireless LAN module to the system board. Reconnect the wireless antenna cable to the wireless LAN module. How to replace the card reader board. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and battery. Removal. Disconnect the cable from the card reader board connector. Remove the two 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the card reader board to the top cover. Lift the card reader board off of the alignment pins on the top cover and remove. Replacement. Place the card reader board onto its alignment pins on the top cover. Replace the two 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the card reader board to the top cover. Reconnect the cable to the card reader board connector. How to replace the touchpad board. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and battery. Removal. First, remove the touchpad bracket by removing the three 2mm P0 Phillips head screws. Lift the touchpad bracket off of the alignment pins. Disconnect the touchpad cable from the touchpad. Peel away the mylar that covers the screws on the touchpad. Remove the three 2mm P1 broadhead screws that secure the touchpad to the top cover. Lift the touchpad up off of the alignment pins and remove. Replacement. Place the touchpad onto the alignment pins on the top cover. Replace the three 2mm P1 broadhead screws that secure the touchpad to the top cover. Reattach the mylar over the three screws that secure the touchpad to the top cover. Connect the touchpad cable to the connector on the touchpad. Place the touchpad bracket on the alignment pins over the touchpad. Replace the three 2mm P0 Phillips head screws that secure the touchpad bracket to the touchpad and top cover. How to replace the heatsink. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and battery. Removal. Remove the four 2.5mm P1 Phillips head screws and the one broadhead screw in the numerical order indicated. The broadhead screw is number 4. Lift the heatsink up and remove it from the system board. Replacement. Note, before replacing the heatsink, the thermal grease should be replaced. The thermal grease should be replaced every time the heatsink is removed. Use alcohol in a soft cloth or an alcohol swab to clean all thermal grease from the heatsink and processor. Use the thermal grease applicator to apply thermal grease to the processor. Place the heatsink into position on the alignment pins on the top cover. Replace the four 2.5mm Phillips head screws and the one broadhead screw in numerical order. How to replace the speakers. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, and heatsink. Removal. Disconnect the DC-in power connector cable from the system board. Remove the DC-in power connector cable from the routing channel on the top cover until the speaker assembly is unobstructed. Disconnect the display panel cable from the system board and remove from its routing channel on the right speaker until the speaker assembly is unobstructed. Disconnect the cable from the card reader board. Disconnect the wireless antenna cable from the LAN module. Remove the wireless antenna cable from the routing channel under the left speaker until the speaker assembly is unobstructed. Remove the 3mm P1 Phillips head screw from the right speaker that secures it to the top cover. Remove the two 3mm P1 Phillips head screws from the left speaker that secure it to the top cover. Disconnect the speaker cable from the system board. Remove the speaker cable from the routing channel on the top cover. Lift the right speaker up off the alignment pins. Lift the left speaker off the alignment pins and away from the retaining tab. Remove the speakers. Replacement. Insert retaining tab under the left speaker into the slot in the retaining bracket on the top cover, and then lower the speaker onto its alignment pins. Place the right speaker onto the alignment pins. Replace the two 3mm P1 Phillips head screws on the left speaker to secure it to the top cover. Replace the 3mm P1 Phillips head screw on the right speaker to secure it to the top cover. Route the speaker cable into the routing channel on the top cover. Route the wireless antenna cable through the routing channel on the left speaker. And connect it to the LAN module. Connect the speaker cable to the system board. Connect the cable to the connector on the card reader board. Route the display panel cable under the tab on the right speaker and connect it to the system board. Route the DC-in power connector cable under the tab on the right speaker and connect it to the system board. How to replace the power connector cable. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and battery. Removal. Disconnect the power connector cable from the system board and remove it from the routing channel under the right speaker. Remove the two 6mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the right hinge to the top cover. Pull the right display panel hinge upright. Lift up the power connector from its cradle in the top cover. Replacement. Place the connector in the cradle on the top cover. Push the right display panel hinge closed. Replace the two 6mm P1 Phillips head screws. Connect the power connector cable to the system board and route the cable along the routing channel under the right speaker. How to replace the battery cable. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, and heatsink. Removal. Disconnect the battery cable from the connector on the system board. Peel away the tape that secures the battery cable to the top cover. Remove the two 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the battery cable to the top cover. Lift the battery cable from the alignment pins and remove. Replacement. Place the battery cable on the alignment pins. Replace the two 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the battery cable to the top cover. Connect the battery cable to the connector on the system board. Reattach the securing tape to the top cover. How to replace the system board. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, memory module, heatsink, and battery cable. Important: make careful note of the routing of all cables connected to the system board for later replacement. Removal. Disconnect the following cables from the system board. Power connector cable. Display panel cable. Speaker cable. Cardboard reader cable. Keyboard cable. Backlight cable. Touchpad cable. Remove the two 2mm P1 Phillips broadhead screws. Remove the 2mm P0 Phillips head screw. Lift the system board up off the alignment pins and remove. Replacement. Place the system board on the alignment pins. Caution: to avoid damage, ensure that all cables are free from being pinched between the system board and the top cover. Replace the 2mm P0 Phillips head screw. Replace the two 2mm P1 Phillips broadhead screws. Reconnect the following cables to the system board. Touchpad cable. Backlight cable. Keyboard cable. Cardboard reader cable. Speaker cable. Display panel cable. Power connector cable. Important. After a system board replacement, be sure to complete post-installation tasks as required that may include verifying functionality of the notebook, updating the BIOS, updating DMI and other settings. How to replace the display panel assembly top cover. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, and heatsink. Removal. Disconnect the power connector cable from the connector on the system board. Remove the power connector cable from the routing channel on the top cover. Disconnect the display panel cable from the connector on the system board. Remove the display panel cable from the routing channel beside the right speaker. Remove the wireless antenna cable from the routing channel alongside the left speaker. Remove the two 6mm P1 screws that secure the left hinge to the top cover. Remove the two 6mm P1 screws that secure the right hinge to the top cover. Pull the left hinge upright. Pull the right hinge upright. Remove the top cover from the display panel assembly. Replacement. Important. When installing a new top cover, remove the components attached to the old top cover and install on the new top cover. Place the top cover in position on the display panel assembly. Route the display panel cable along the routing channel under the right hinge. Push the right hinge down until it's closed. Replace the two 6mm P1 screws that secure the right hinge. Route the wireless antenna cable along the routing channel under the left hinge. Push the left hinge down until it's closed. Replace the two 6mm P1 screws that secure the left hinge. Route the wireless antenna cable along the routing channel on the left speaker. Route the display panel cable into the routing channel and connect the cable to the system board. Connect the power connector cable to the system board. Route the power connector cable under the tab on the right speaker and along the routing channel on the top cover. How to replace the hinge cover. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, and display panel assembly. Important: make careful note of the routing of the wireless antenna and display panel cables for later replacement. Removal. Carefully release the retention clips on the hinge cover from the display panel assembly and remove. Replacement. Align the hinge cover with the retention clips and tabs on the display panel assembly. Press down firmly along the length of the hinge cover until it clicks into place. How to replace the display bezel. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, display panel assembly, and hinge cover. Removal. Separate the display bezel from the display enclosure using your fingernails or flat-edged non-marring tool, starting at the top and then around the sides. Use a flat-bladed tool to separate the bottom corners of the display bezel from the display enclosure. Use a flat-bladed tool to separate the bottom of the display bezel near the bottom of the display panel. Lift the display bezel off of the display enclosure. Remove the display bezel. Replacement. Align the display bezel with the webcam and place the display bezel into position on the display enclosure. Press down firmly along the edges until the display bezel is fully attached to the display enclosure. How to replace the webcam. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, display panel assembly, hinge cover, and display bezel. Removal. Remove the webcam cable from the routing channel on the display enclosure. Disconnect the webcam cable from the connector on the webcam. Using a non-metallic flat-bladed tool, carefully remove the webcam from the adhesive and alignment pins that secure it to the display enclosure. Remove the webcam. Replacement. Place the webcam onto its alignment pins and gently apply pressure to the webcam to adhere it to the display enclosure. Connect the webcam cable to its connector on the webcam. Route the webcam cable along the routing channel that secures it to the display enclosure. How to replace the display panel. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, display panel assembly, hinge cover, and display bezel. Important: make careful note of the routing of the display panel cable for later replacement. Removal. Remove the display panel cable from the routing channel on the display enclosure. Take firm hold of the tab of the stretch release tape at the bottom of the panel. Carefully pull the stretch release tape from the bottom of the panel as horizontally as possible until the tape clears the display panel assembly. Caution: if you break the tape, it will be very difficult to remove the panel. Lift the display panel and remove, taking care not to tear the cables. Peel away the fabric adhesive that secures the display panel cable to the display panel. Peel away the plastic adhesive tape that secures the display panel cable to the display panel. Disconnect the display panel cable from the display panel. Replacement. Place new strips of stretch release tape on the display enclosure. Note: refer to the service guide for the position of the tape strips. Connect the display panel cable to the display panel. Reattach the plastic adhesive tape over the display panel connector. Reattach the fabric adhesive over the display panel connector. Position the display panel over its alignment pins on the display enclosure and replace. Route the display panel cable in the routing channel on the display enclosure. How to replace the display panel cable. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, display panel assembly, hinge cover, display bezel, and display panel. Remove the webcam cable from the routing channel on the display enclosure. Disconnect the webcam cable from the webcam. Separate the display panel cable from the adhesive that adheres it to the display enclosure. Replacement. Position the display panel cable on the markings on the display enclosure and press down along the length of the cable to adhere it to the adhesive on the display enclosure. Connect the webcam cable to the webcam. Route the webcam cable along the routing channel that secures it to the display enclosure. How to replace the hinges. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, display panel assembly, hinge cover, display bezel, and display panel. Important, make careful note of the routing of the wireless antenna cables for later replacement. Removal. Remove the two P1 Phillips head screws and the two P00 Phillips broadhead screws that secure the right display panel hinge to the display enclosure. Lift the right display panel hinge off of the alignment pins on the display enclosure and remove. The left display panel hinge is removed in the same manner. Replacement. Place the right display panel hinge into position on the display enclosure. Replace the two P1 Phillips head screws and the two P00 Phillips broadhead screws that secure the right display panel hinge to the display enclosure. The left display panel hinge is replaced in the same manner. How to replace the wireless antennas. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, wireless LAN module, card reader board, heatsink, display panel assembly, hinge cover, display bezel, display panel, and the display panel hinges. Important, make careful note of the routing of the wireless antenna cables for later replacement. Removal. Remove the left wireless antenna cable from the routing channel on the display enclosure. Carefully peel back the metallic tape that secures the wireless antenna transceiver to the display enclosure. Using a non-conductive flat-bladed tool, remove the wireless antenna transceiver from the display enclosure. Remove the wireless antenna. The right wireless antenna is removed in the same manner. Replacement. Caution: use care when handling and installing the new antennas. Accidental bending of the antenna elements will detune the antennas and degrade notebook performance. Place the left wireless antenna transceiver into position and gently apply pressure to adhere it to the display enclosure. Carefully reattach the metallic tape that secures the wireless antenna transceiver to the display enclosure. Route the wireless antenna cable along the routing channel that secures it to the display enclosure. The right wireless antenna is replaced in the same manner.